Welcome to a very special episode of PC-88 Paradise, where I've got some good news. A long-lost PC-88 game has been found. To explain, first of all, regulars of the channel may know that the particular model PC-88 I use is the PC-8801MC, and this model has one unique trick. You can attach the same CD drive used by the TurboGrafx or PC Engine on the top of the tower in order to play PC-88 CD-ROMs. I made a video all about this system back in 2017 if you want to learn more. However, the PC-88 CD-ROM format didn't catch on, and only a demo disc, a dictionary software disc, and 2 games were ever released for the format. One of the games is Mirrors, which I made a video about back in 2021, and since the making of that video, by the way, dedicated fans have even released an English translation patch. But the second PC-88 CD-ROM game was so rare that for decades no one could confirm for sure whether it even existed, and it was widely considered to be lost media. That game was Dios CD-ROM. Dios was a side-scrolling sci-fi action-adventure game originally released in 1989 by the company Zack, whose games I've never covered on the channel before, and who, by the way, also used to spell their name like this. Dios had always been known to have been released on floppy disk for the PC-88, PC-98, MSX2, and X68000. However, Zack themselves had also advertised an elusive 5th version of the game for PC-88 CD-ROM, coming in late January 1990. However, in the following decades, no one could seem to confirm having ever seen the game in the wild. It wasn't until 2017 that a Japanese Twitter user posted a photo of the actual game. Then in 2020, another individual uploaded a video of the game's opening running on an emulator. But in both of these cases, this was unfortunately all we got. However, these served to confirm that the game did indeed probably get released in 1990, just in very, very small quantities. Fast forward to 2024, when self-described game preservationist Krugman managed to find the game for sale on an online retail site in Japan. You can read all about Krugman's struggles to get the game working on an emulator on his site dirtyfloppies.com. But today I'm going to be playing the game on a real PC-8801MC, and all the footage throughout this video was captured on real hardware. Thanks to Krugman's cooperation, I can also show this footage of the packaging. The triangular sticker on the cover is the only thing that differentiates this version, and the cover art is stolen from a 1986 illustration by H.R. Geiger. Inside, there's only a single sheet of additional instructions for the CD version of the game. Then, in addition to the CD-ROM, there is actually one floppy disk required to start the game. As a bonus, there's sort of a military ID card for one of the main characters of the game. The manual itself is identical to the one that came with all the other releases of Dios. There are lots of fun little illustrations. And of course, the main attraction, the CD-ROM itself. For some reason, there's an advertisement flyer for the game. Then there are some Zack stickers, including one for Dios and one for another Zack title, All Fame. Then there's a short manga. And finally, a map showing the planets that have been colonized by humans in the universe of the game, including planet Dios. Though the PC-8801MC is capable of booting CD-ROM disks, which is the way you start Mirrors, with Dios instead you have to boot the floppy disk with the CD-ROM also inserted. We are greeted by the Dios CD-ROM boot screen, and then we have to wait about 45 seconds while the game loads 80 PCM data from the CD-ROM into the RAM on the PC-88 soundboard too. Once that's finished, we get to the main menu where we can watch the opening, start the game, or create a user disk. Strangely, if you're using the keyboard, you have to press the V key for enter. Anyway, we'll watch the opening first. Dios utilizes the CD-ROM technology in a completely different way than Mirrors did. Mirrors used a ridiculous floppy disk caching method so that it could play CD Redbook audio as the game's BGM for long periods of time. The game also didn't have any voices. Dios, on the other hand, loads all data directly from the CD into the PC-88's RAM, and the music is all FM synth, using the soundboard too. CD Redbook audio is used only for the character voices. In fact, every single line of dialogue in the game is spoken aloud. I have no idea who did the voice acting for this game, by the way, but it ranges from sounding pretty amateur to actually reasonably professional at other times. The guy who does the high-pitched, generic young protagonist voice certainly sounds the part. The opening in the floppy disk version of the game is identical, except of course it used text instead of recorded voices. It is an impressive PC-88 opening sequence either way, utilizing plenty of animation and even some parallax scrolling. The opening takes us to the flagship of what the game calls the UN Peacekeeping Force, where 4 young cadets are about to attend a mission briefing. On the way there, they discuss rumors of 1,600 men who were dispatched recently to the planet Dios, but got wiped out by mutants. A lot of the plot in this game, by the way, reminds me of the movie Aliens.
Game over, man! It's game over!
At the mission briefing, the 4 cadets learn that their task is to descend to the planet and search for survivors, as well as recover samples of the mutants. In particular, they are to find 2 known survivors, who happen to be a young boy and a monk. They are also ordered to regroup with a cyborg who is sent in ahead of them. After the briefing, there's an ominous conversation where a senior officer expresses surprise that he would use that monster like this. It's impossible to know who they're referring to, but maybe we'll get some clues later. We're shown the 4 cadets descending to the planet Dios in the dropship.
And I'm telling you, I got a bad feeling about this drop.
You always say that, Frost. You always say I got a bad feeling about this drop.
Okay.
Next comes the second rocking part of the opening, where we're introduced to the 7 playable characters, starring in this game. First, we have young protagonist guy Zack Hunt, who seems to have superpowers, allowing him to release a beam attack from his hands. Then we have the cyborg, RSC Duo, and the monk Sam Chest, and some more of the cadets shown earlier, Sherry Ray-Ban and Fami Mart. Wait, Ray-Ban? Fami Mart? What kind of lazy English character names are these? Anyway, there's also Rod Soul, and finally the young boy, Mark Hills, who rides around in some sort of mechanized walker. As usual, I'm summarizing things here for time, but if you want to see the entire intro with English subtitles, then be sure to check out Krugman's video here. After the opening, we return to the main menu where we have to create a user disk before we can start the game. This is where Krugman had some trouble on the emulator, but on real hardware it works perfectly. You insert a blank disk in drive 2 and it copies data from the included floppy disk currently in drive 1 in order to create a user disk. Then when we start the game, it asks us to remove the included floppy and replace it with the user disk. We'll still have to use the included floppy every time we boot the game, however. When we start a new game, it asks us which character we want to load. Each character has their own stage, and we can play them in any order. Occasionally, one character's progress may affect how far one of the other characters is allowed to progress in their stage. Anyway, you'll see. Let's start with Zack Hunt, who is sort of the main protagonist. Right away, we can hear a CD voice here, where Rod tells Zack to be careful.
Oi, Zack, 気をつけていけよ!
It's weird playing a PC-88 game where the characters suddenly talk in crystal clear voices. It feels more like I'm playing a game for some other early CD-ROM system like the PC Engine. But again, not just the voices, but everything about this game feels very technically impressive for PC-88. Check out the parallax scrolling in the background. This reminds me so much of Ys 3, released earlier the same year. Or maybe Wanderers from Super Scheme? Yeah? Dios feels like a combination of several of the best PC-88 games, in fact. Sorcerian, Valis 2, and the game is an absolute graphical tour de force on the PC-88, pushing this hardware to its absolute limits. Sure, the bumpy frame rate may look terrible compared to the consoles of the time, but this is impressive for hardware that has no native scrolling or sprite handling capabilities. While the game may look like it plays as well as Ys 3, unfortunately it has its issues. First of all, if you're using a gamepad, the jump and attack buttons are reversed, with B for jump and A for attack, which might bother some players. Personally, I can deal with it, and it's also worth mentioning that the button order on Japanese PC gamepads wasn't standardized, so there are some pads where the buttons will be in the opposite order, though I haven't seen many. The game also has turbo fire for both attack and jump. Don't you love games that have turbo fire jumping? Yeah, neither do I. A bigger issue can occur though in the middle of your jumps. If you press either up or down diagonally, even slightly, your character will stop in mid-air and fall to the ground. So again, I dealt with it by just being really careful to only press forward when trying to make long jumps. But if unlike me you're someone good at playing action games with a keyboard, you might prefer to do so here. Another thing is that there are many platforms that you can drop through by pressing down, whereas in most action games it would probably be down plus jump. This means that there are certain platforms where you can't crouch, unless you reach over to the dedicated crouch key on the keyboard, X. Dios also allows you to take hits in rapid succession, making it very easy to die suddenly. Luckily, if you do manage to survive, you can gradually restore your meter by destroying enemies. Some of the enemies drop items too when destroyed, and items can also be sometimes picked up in predetermined locations. The items include rations, which will restore your HP, an item called a sun rod, which revives you when you die, as well as other items with various effects, such as temporary invincibility or slowing enemies down. You use items by pressing the spacebar and opening the menu. From the menu, you can also save or load your game at almost any time, which is good because I died a lot. Each of the characters has their own save slot, keeping their current progress through their respective stages. You can switch and work on a different character's stage at any time. The stage layouts are non-linear and feel very much to me like they were inspired by Falcom's Sorcerian, since it was a hugely popular title on PC-88. Though of course there are plenty of other games the developers might have had in mind. In Zack's stage, if we go the wrong way first, we'll find a locked door. We have to instead go to an entirely different part of the stage and fight this boss who appears suddenly. The bosses in this game often become stupidly easy once you learn the simple patterns and safe spots that many of them have. However, you may have a lot of trouble learning them in the first place, since the bosses will often kill you right away before you can figure out anything, requiring you to load your game over and over again until you do. When you defeat the boss, you'll get a key to unlock that door we found earlier, which leads inside the mutant lab. Here I found it very easy to get lost. This part repeats over and over until you find the right way, and I found myself worried that this entire game was going to be like this. But don't give up. Here's the most counterintuitive part, where you'll need to go this way in order to proceed. The rest of Zack's stage has some serious spoilers for the game, so let's save the rest of this stage for the end of the video, and instead move down the list and load the save file for Mark Hills next, in order to start his stage. Man, I hate playing this kid in his big stupid walking machine. He has a large hitbox, and it's difficult to hit enemies with his weapon. By the way, I haven't mentioned this yet, but one annoying thing about the CD version is how loud the 80 PCM sound effects are compared to the music. In the floppy disk version, this is less of a problem because the music is actually a bit louder. My best guess is that they made the music quieter in the CD version so that it wouldn't drown out the CD voices, but they should have lowered the volume of the 80 PCM sound effects too. The music produced here by the soundboard too, by the way, is not bad. It sounds like they definitely took inspiration from Falcom and some of the best games on the PC-88. though the music is maybe not quite as nice sounding or memorable as a Falcom game. Anyway, Mark eventually finds a door deep in his stage where it says you need to play through all the other characters' stages before he can enter. This is the first example of the game requiring you to play other stages before allowing you to proceed, but there's a better example in Sherry Ray-Ban's stage next. Sherry arrives in a civilian city where he finds survivors and asks them to wait for Family Mart to come for them later. Later in the stage, Sherry also finds a point where the game asks us to play Family Mart's stage first in order to proceed. Next, Rod Soul's stage has him taking out a facility where troops of unknown origin have been seen coming and going. It isn't very important to the main story, though. When Rod clears his stage and returns to the dropship, the game brings up the load menu, prompting us to select a different character. From this point on, we can no longer load Rod's save file, meaning that for the first time, we've completely cleared a stage. So let's move on to Family Mart. She goes to the same civilian city that Sherry visited earlier, where a man asks her to rescue his son from a nearby cave. She goes to the cave and is attacked by a rather difficult boss. Once she destroys it, she returns to the man in the city, and the man says that the boss she destroyed was his son, and that he didn't expect her to return alive. So it turns out that the man is actually a mutant in disguise. They capture Fammy and she says, "Sherry, help me," before the game loads up Sherry's stage again, and instead of the game allowing you to now proceed forward here, what you actually have to do is go back to the town and the building where Fammy was captured. There, the same man from earlier turns into a monster, and Sherry has to fight him. So Fammy is rescued, and Sherry tells her to return to base. We then can proceed past the part where it wouldn't let us pass earlier in Sherry's stage, and defeat a boss, before the stage is over. I then tried loading up Fammy's data on a hunch that maybe you have to bring her back to the dropship yourself, and indeed you do. And on the way there, Fammy has to fight one more surprise boss before she can return to the ship and finish her stage. We then have RSC Duo and Sam Chest's stages left at the bottom. Both of these stages are very action heavy and have basically no story to them. The characters never even speak, aside from one line from each of them when they successfully clear their stages and arrive at the dropship.
長い戦いだった。後々もの無事を祈ろう。
You are under arrest for violation of Penal Code 7538-7.
So now let's put a spoiler warning before showing the exciting conclusion to Zack Hunt's stage. Deep inside the lab Zack was exploring, he'll meet a strange man named Gord who knows Zack's name, and who says that Zack's brothers are the ones who have made all this mess, and that Gord was created by the military, just like Zack was. Zack has no idea what he is talking about, but anyway Gord says that he cannot allow Zack to pass, and so they must fight. Later in the stage, you'll want to make sure you pick up Zack's best weapon in order to have a fighting chance against the coming boss. It's important to know how to change your main weapon in this game. What you do is press and hold Z on the keyboard and press up and down to toggle weapons before releasing Z. The final boss of Zack's stage is a giant face who calls Zack his son and explains that he was once a normal human who was experimented on by the military and then used to create all the mutants on this planet. He is now using the mutants to take revenge on the military for what they did to him. Zack can't forgive him though, since the mutants have also killed the innocent civilians on this planet. They will have to fight.
Allow me to demonstrate my true power as I reduce you to a quivering puddle of muck.
What can you do stuck to a wall?
The giant face explains that if Zack kills him, then he will die too, but Zack says that now that he knows the truth about where he came from, he would rather be dead. When Zack defeats the boss, he becomes unable to move, and the game brings up the load menu prompting us to select a different character, meaning that this stage has been cleared. So now all that's left is Mark Hill's stage, where we were told earlier to clear all the other stages before proceeding forward. We have to proceed down this stupid corridor with all these enemies that can only be attacked while crouching. Man, I hate playing as this kid. After several screens of this long corridor, Mark arrives in the same room where Zack became unable to move and finds Zack. Zack tells him to run away from here, and Mark says that sure, he will, but first get in the back seat. Zack immediately thanks him and gets in. Hey, what was all that about Zack dying if he defeated his father earlier? We then get a long cutscene and... Wait, is this the ending? It is! Well, I gotta admit that really caught me off guard. I was expecting probably a whole final stage that gets unlocked at the end, or at least an end boss of some sort. That was a rather anticlimactic way to end. So anyway, the party regroups, and they see Mark and Zack arriving in the distance. Everyone is okay, and they return to base together. Then we get a wall of text that only remains on screen for about 5 or 6 seconds, probably not even enough time for most Japanese natives to read it at a leisurely pace. Luckily I'm recording all of this so I can pause and read it all. It says the 4 of them were able to rescue the 2 survivors on the planet Dios and return home. The military cleaned the remaining mutants from the planet, and they're nowhere to be found anymore. RSC Duo returned to Dios to maintain order, and Rod, Sherry, and Fami returned to normal duty, but the 3 of them, having learned the military's secrets, had to live the rest of their lives under constant surveillance. Hey, that's sad. Mark was taken to live at a refugee facility, and Sam returned to Earth to continue his training. But you'll notice one character who isn't mentioned here at all. As for what became of him, we get no text, but rather only the final screen of the game. What does it even mean? I still have so many questions, and it seems the military never has to pay for their evil deeds. I guess not all stories necessarily have a truly happy or even satisfying ending. And there are no credits at the end, by the way. This is the final screen of the game. So with that being the case, let's go ahead and show the other versions of Dios. The original was the PC-88 floppy disk version, which required a lot more disk changing, since it used 8 disks plus a user disk, and it does seem to have other subtle differences. I noticed at least a couple of BGMs that have a faster tempo in the floppy version. Otherwise, it's basically the same as the CD-ROM version, aside from the lack of voices. So let's move on to the version that was released soon after that, the PC-98 version. As you can imagine, it is graphically the same as the PC-88 version, but with worse music, since the PC-98 only had monaural FM sound at the time. It also, of course, lacks the 80 PCM sound effects of the PC-88 versions. There's no gamepad support either, or at least I couldn't get it to work. The opening is also a bit different for some reason, lacking some of the animation and the names of the characters on screen. It's a slightly worse version of the game, in practically every way. The MSX2 version is a familiar story if you've been watching my previous videos. The graphics had to be redrawn and the speed... Holy crap, that's slow! The opening for some reason has no music and is silent. And as usual, this lovely MSX2 version is the only version which currently has an English patch. Next, we get to the X68000 version. It has the opposite problem from the MSX2 version. It runs way too fast. This is the game running on a real X68000 Ace, which is one of the earlier models with the same CPU as the original X68000, by the way. Why can't they get this game to run at a decent speed on either the MSX2 or the X68000? Aside from the speed issues though, this is otherwise by far the smoothest and nicest looking version of the game, with decent sound as well. This one doesn't use 80 PCM for the sound effects, and the ones they've replaced them with are of varying quality. The music is definitely on par with the PC-88 soundboard too, though. Then finally, the PC-88 CD-ROM version, which I've been playing throughout the video, seems to have been the last version of the game to be released. Even without the improvements of the CD-ROM version, Dios was a technically impressive PC-88 game. But gameplay-wise, I'm afraid I'm going to have to use the phrase, good for a PC-88 game here. If this game had been released on basically any console of the time, I think the gameplay would have been widely regarded as garbage. On top of that, while the plot and setting of the game are certainly cool, the ending is unsatisfying, and the game definitely feels a bit rough around the edges at times. Still, there are a ton of good ideas and plenty to like here. As a PC-88 fan, I really enjoyed seeing the hardware pushed to its limits throughout the one solid day's worth of playtime this game gave me. You also have to give Zack credit. They were a very small company, releasing their games for multiple platforms on a very tight schedule. Dios was their second last game before the company went under, and I wouldn't doubt that producing this CD-ROM version of Dios contributed to their downfall. By the time it was released in early 1990, I'm sure it had already become clear that the PC-88 CD-ROM standard was a failure, and that's probably why they produced so few copies of the game. But one thing's for sure, I'm so glad that I finally had the opportunity to play the other PC-88 CD game taking advantage of this unique hardware, the PC-8801 MC. Thanks for watching this episode of PC-88 Paradise. In addition to all my awesome patrons, I want to give another huge thanks to Krugman for finding the game, and for all the help he provided with this episode. And thank all of you for watching, as always. Bye for now.